Rock and roll music is the main weapon.
Check. 1, 2. Alright. Bust it. I was born with the voice of a riot, a storm, lightning, a function, the form. Far from the normal, follow like cattle, I'm more like the catalyst.
What's going on, guys? My name is Aldeniro, and welcome to episode 72, I think, of The Midnight Hour. Today we're going to discuss Donald Trump, because it looks like he's really going to win this election, guys. No, for real, I decided to switch things up a little bit and change from my usual sort of anti-Trump vague sentiment that I tend to spew on this podcast every now and then, or at least whenever the topic comes up. I think that's primarily because, as an outsider, like a guy not living in America, this election has been batshit insane to me, and I can't even begin to express how different it has been to anything else that's happened in my lifetime in that sense. I've said a lot of anti-Trump stuff because I do truly think that the guy is sort of an intellectual problem due to the way that he speaks, the way he comes across, the way that I think that he thinks. But I decided to talk to somebody who voted for him because I think it's really important to show the other sides to certain arguments. And to be honest, the main reason for this is that I woke up on the morning that it was announced that Trump was the president-elect. I looked at my phone, I saw that Trump had won, and I just immediately thought to myself, amidst the haze of shock that I felt because the polls suggested that Clinton was going to absolutely drop Donald Trump, I was just thinking there is no way that 59 million Americans are racist. Like, I just refuse to believe that that is a truth. I started asking myself, how could he have won the race based on the worldview that I've built up in my own head over the last few months? So from what I know inside the ideological bubble that is my social media timelines, that Donald Trump is a huge racist, a misogynist, a probable rapist, a guy who is just preposterously stupid and dangerously hateful. And the more I start chipping away at it, the more I think that his presidency, like, that's going to happen is some kind of mistake, like a publicity stunt that's gone horribly wrong, and due to the left's failure to produce a viable candidate that people believed in, it's ended up that we're going to be left with President Donald Trump. And people voted for him for a multitude of reasons, a myriad of reasons. There are so many reasons, amazing reasons. You won't believe how many reasons there are. That's me talking like Trump if you didn't get the whole point of me saying that. But I think there's this, obviously there's the economic anxiety that has been sort of pointed to by certain sections of the media, in that there's a white underclass who feel like they've been left behind by the left and their sort of multicultural leanings, or maybe their tendency to behave in a specific way towards multiracial people than they do towards whites, or whatever it is. There's also people who just want a brick gone through the window of the establishment. Like, there's people who are just so sick of the status quo. They want to shake things up. They want a guy who's gonna rustle a few jimmies up there in Capitol Hill or Washington, or whatever it is that the kids say these days. But for real, I just wanted to have a look at why someone would be compelled to vote for such an obviously monstrous man. And the more I looked into it, the more I found that there are too many reasons to just point the finger and say, well, they did it because they're racist, or they did it because they hate the gays, or whatever reason it might be. I don't want anyone to think that this episode is me announcing a departure from, like, the way that I think or the way that I am, but I have started to question why I think certain things, and Trump becoming president has been kind of a wake-up call for me to not necessarily believe every single thing that the people within the ideological bubble that I exist in say, and to question things a little bit more, because I have always been about questioning everything. It's something that I've used to pride myself on, and I feel like I've lost that slightly, or I've gotten a bit lazy, or I feel very ostracized and excluded from what's happening in American culture, given that I am, of course, an Irish person who lives in Ireland. And I just wanted to examine that a little bit. I've always believed in telling the other side of the story, and I think that that's something that's really important for the future of discourse, specifically on social media. So today's guest is a YouTuber who used to go by the name Skag, is currently known as Matt Christensen, which coincidentally is his real name. He's a fellow YouTuber, as I said. He also has a podcast called Beauty and the Beta. He does a lot of videos where he kind of comments on what's happening in the political world in America. His videos are very captivating, and they offer a completely different insight to what you're likely to find on my podcast, and that's something that I respect. He was recommended in a thread on our subreddit, which is reddit.com/r/midnight-hour. There was a thread there about guest suggestions, and two people in particular said that they would love to see Skag on. I also got some tweets and some comments on YouTube videos suggesting the same thing, so I decided to try and make that a reality, and he very graciously agreed to come on the podcast and discuss I guess the nature of Trump's presidency, how we got here, what it's going to look like, where the media went so wrong, and interestingly for me, why he did not want to vote for Hillary Clinton. So as I said, this was a very enlightening discussion for me. Some stuff came up that I hadn't even considered before, and stuff that I wasn't aware of before. So as I said, I think it's really important to get the other side of things. I don't want to be the type of person who shuts out anything that disagrees with me and labels it a racist or a misogynist or anything like that. I really do want to push forward towards true intellectual honesty, and not just what I think the world is about. It's sort of a difficult thing to articulate. The song opening the episode is March of Death by DJ Shadow and Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine. It was kind of the first song that came to mind when I was like, what's an anti-Hillary policy sort of song? And that was what came to mind. I decided to use it. I think it's awesome. I hope that you guys like it. If you guys enjoy the episode, or you want to support the podcast in any way whatsoever, please leave a like on the video. The SoundCloud link will be in the description. You can go over there and download this so that you can listen to it on your phone while you're on your way to work, on your way to school, on your way to college, whatever. Also, the podcast is on iTunes, and thank you guys so much for the ratings that you've left on iTunes. They were so nice to read. I looked through the British iTunes, the Irish iTunes, and the American iTunes, and saw ratings on all of them, and they were just really, really nice and really rewarding. So thank you very much for that. Please continue to do so. If you haven't already, leave a rating on iTunes. That would be awesome. In the description, you'll find all of the relative links for this episode. You'll also find links to Matt's Twitter, his YouTube page, and I think he's just set up a SoundCloud page, so I'll link that off too. So you guys should definitely check him out once the podcast is over. And just, I don't know, sit back and enjoy, and I will talk to you guys at the end.
Who let the cowboy on the saddle? He don't know a missile from a gavel. On the left, on the left, left, right, left, on the left, on the left, left, right, left, on the left, on the left, left, right.
Okay, you're looking good. You might bend them just a little left. Just a little left to about 170.
No power in the verse can stop me.
So Matt, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your time. I guess I'll just start off and ask you, who did you vote for in this election? And I guess maybe start off with who you voted for in previous elections, since you've been eligible to vote.
Sure. Well, thanks for hosting me. I really appreciate being here, and I appreciate the request and recommendation from some of your listeners, so that's really awesome. I voted I'll start with where I voted this time. I voted to make America great again, and I am unapologetic in that. But I will qualify that with by saying that I voted Democratic. I voted the opposition party, if you're not familiar, every election of my life up until this one that I was eligible. So I voted for Obama twice. I've checked the Democratic box in every election in which I voted, which has been every single one, including midterms, any local elections, state elections, any time. So this was a turning point election for me. This was a deviation. This was a first time checking that Republican box on any level, to be honest.
That's what I was going to ask. Is this the first time you've ever gone red, or, to the dark side, as it were?
I can't remember. It's possible I might have in maybe some local or state elections, because a lot of the time there might be some very specific issue. Sometimes there's a personal, like a candidate personally, that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
you're talking about offices of major consequence. No, I've never voted Republican prior to this one.
And what do you think about Mike Pence, his running mate?
I think there's a lot of hysteria over Mike Pence right now. Some of it potentially justified. I mean, so the controversy on Mike Pence, he was the former governor of Indiana, and when he was governor of Indiana, they passed one of these religious freedom laws that is designed to give business owners the right to refuse service, it's hard to phrase this very precisely, but what they're designed to do is give the business kind of a religious opt-out or a religious safety away from government intrusion. And so the way this would be used, and the way critics of this fear it would be used, and probably rightfully so, is say like if I'm a caterer, the classic example is like a baker or a caterer, and I don't want to cater a gay wedding, or I don't want to bake a cake for a gay wedding.
Yeah.
The religious freedom law would allow you to do that without facing any kind of penalty. And that, my position on that, I think, has evolved over time, but I can see why people have an opposition to that. And I can see why they don't like, and it became so controversial that Mike Pence actually backed off of this. And I don't know what the status of that law is now. It might be, I don't know if it's scrapped entirely, or I know at the time there was talk we're going to rework some of the language to accommodate some of the issues that protesters had with it, because there were all kinds of boycotts that went on along with that on a national scale.
We had sorry to cut across you. I was just going to say we had a case like that really recently in Northern Ireland where it was for a gay wedding, and it was literally just that a gay couple wanted a cake baked for their wedding, and this place outright refused. And I believe they actually got in some legal trouble for it. I don't know exactly what happened, but it wasn't like seen as, well, that's okay, it's their right to do that or whatever. There's no law protecting that kind of discrimination, and as far as I know, they did receive some kind of sanction. So I would say that's fair, because it sort of is a prejudice. You know, it's not just a I don't know, it feels like a very personal kind of prejudice to have. So like I'd sort of stand up to that and say that's totally okay.
You're on you're okay on what side?
I'm okay on them receiving legal punishment for it, because I just don't think that it's. I totally agree with like a company's right to, they reserve the right to refuse access or entry to whoever they want. But if it's for discriminatory reasons, then I don't think that in our society that's something that should be allowed.
Yeah, and to be honest, I kind of started off on that side, but I've come around on it a little bit, and I can still see the argument you're making. I've kind of come around on it because I believe in what you were describing earlier. So if I'm a business owner, I can serve or provide services I want at my own discretion, and if I do so in a way that inflames the public or irritates the public, well, market forces will correct that too. If you're a scumbag pizza shop store or pizza shop guy, and you won't make pizzas or serve, gay people or whoever, word will get around, and people won't like that, and people will stop eating your pizza. And in fact, in Indiana, that's exactly what happened. There was a guy who did that, who used this law to say, you know what, I'm not giving pizza to gay people, and the Yelp reviews just destroyed him. And I don't know what happened to his business, but I imagine not good things.
Yeah.
So, and to be clear, I'm someone who, I consider myself a cultural libertarian, and that is why I was previously attracted to the Democratic Party. One reason why, anyway.
Yeah.
It's because they mostly stood for these things. It's like, you should be able to live your life as you see fit, so long as you're not harming anybody else. And I certainly don't think gay couples are harming anybody else, although some people might make that argument. I wouldn't. And I think they should be entitled to the same legal rights as everybody else is. But I also think part of that cultural libertarianism, as it evolves in my head, is pizza shop guy should be able to do what he wants so long as he's not harming anybody else. Maybe there's an argument that not giving them pizza harms them. I don't know. It's a little murky. So
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think it would be a really good social experiment, and I use that term in its actual proper usage and not the YouTube usage that we see nowadays. But if you were to have a Muslim bakery who refused to make a cake because it's against their religion, if you could, how would the left react to that? Like,
I see. Yeah, that's very clever.
That would be so interesting to me, because I guarantee that the majority of the LGBT community would say, "Well, that's their right. That's fair enough."
Well, that is part of the fraud. I mean, we defend Islam a lot of the times. Well, that's their culture. Who are you to tell them what their culture is? Well, the only culture we don't say that for is Christian conservative culture.
Yeah.
That's the way it is in the United States. We're supposed to tolerate every culture except for that culture. And like I said, I disagree probably with some of the really conservative social stances that particular ideological faction has. But at the same time, I recognize that it's not, if I believe in cultural libertarianism, it's not necessarily my job to go tell them that they must conform or else. As long as they're not harming anybody. And I'm not persuaded that they actually are at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially because I obviously have grown up in Ireland, which is a strongly Catholic country. Even nowadays, like, there's still strong Catholic roots everywhere, and so I've been surrounded periodically by people of that persuasion, like that sort of strong Republican, like, family values type persuasion, and I can identify that, okay, these people, like, some of them whom I actually know personally voted against we just had a referendum on gay marriage in this country, and overwhelmingly voted in favour of, but I know people who voted against it, and yet I am convinced that they are not in fact homophobic. They just don't understand it, because to them, that's not the world that they're from. Like, it represents this cultural change that makes them afraid, like that kind of thing.
Well, and like it or not, there are good arguments. I mean, I am somebody who, whether we like it or not, the two-parent heterosexual household, we can demonstrate through research, is the ideal scenario in which to raise a child and have that child become successful. So I do think there's definitely a credible case to be made that that's the type of family arrangement we want to encourage. The question is, how far do we go in encouraging that? I mean, do we go as far as to say these other types of relationships won't be allowed? I'm certainly not I'm not going to go that far, but there is a case to be made to what they're saying, that there is the cultural value of encouraging that type of relationship is very high, and we need to maintain that encouragement.
Is there not a counter argument, though, that the sample size of same-sex marriages is not really significant enough to judge whether or not it is a good environment or a bad one, because it hasn't been allowed, you know? Like, I know couples have done it and stuff, but it doesn't feel like something that could be observed on anywhere near the same scale as same-sex marriages in Western countries. So
yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't know the numbers, and specifically what I'm talking about too is not necessarily gay marriages or homosexual marriages. Specifically, I'm talking about, say, two-parent households versus single-parent, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I do think cultural conservatives would probably argue that, you know, there is a social, I don't know if they'd say like a war on marriage or something like that, but we have gone in a trend that has devalued it as an institution potentially, and I think there are consequences for doing that. Now, does gay marriage devalue it? That's an interesting debate. I don't see why it does, and I would also say that, you know, even if let's grant the premise that the heterosexual two-parent household is the best for raising kids, you know, I can grant that premise and still believe that a gay married couple that wants to love a child can do a damn good job of taking care of a child and raising it better than, you know, foster care or whatever other arrangement that child might be in. I think we can encourage the ideal while still accepting the outliers, and that's what I would hope for.
Yeah, that was one of the main things that the No campaign in Ireland had, was a picture of a family with a baby, like a mum, a dad, and a baby, and the line was like, a child deserves a mother and a father. And it's sort of, I found that argument to be flawed, because what you're kind of saying there is, well, I'd rather the child grows up in an orphanage or like I'd rather a child stays in an orphanage for however long it takes for a baby to get adopted than them have two parents that definitely do love it. But I am biased because I was raised by a single parent, and I think I've turned out all right, so I can't just sort of it's something I really can sympathize or empathize with. I mean, I can understand it, but I can't put myself in those shoes for too long.
And there, of course, there's all kinds of anecdotal counter evidence to be provided, and that's great. And I don't think anyone, at least nobody I know, wants to say that like we should ban parenthood or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm with them insofar as I think there are things we would like to encourage a little. Like encouragement, I'm fine with. Banning things is where they start to lose me. No matter if it's Christian conservatives wanting to ban gay marriage, or if it's SJWs wanting to ban certain words, or ban, in this case, I guess ban a pizza guy's store or a pizza guy from selling to whoever he wants for whatever reason he wants.
Yeah, I do have a lot more to say about that, but I think I'll pull us back into the topic a little bit.
Yeah, because we went a long way off, Mike.
Yeah.
The only thing I was going to say about him too is there's hysteria about him, but the role of vice president is largely inconsequential unless Donald Trump dies.
Which, no, just kidding.
It could happen. I mean, it could happen, but his doctor, if you believe his doctor, he's in the best shape of anyone ever to run for president, because Donald Trump is always the best everything. It could also matter in the Senate if you're familiar with American politics. So in the case of a tie in the Senate, one of our legislative bodies, the vice president could break a tie. But Mike Pence is very much a states' rights guy. We're not going to see some sweeping legislation at the federal level that tells states how to operate.
Yeah.
Because he's very much a states' rights guy. So he does not have much power currently, and even if he did, it would kind of go against his personal philosophy to start being an anti-gay dictator or something.
Yeah, that's one of the things about I cannot take any more comparisons between Trump and Hitler, because you were looking for something that isn't there, and you're using confirmation bias to act like it's...
They are so similar. I was reading an article that said, because Trump's big thing, he said on 60 Minutes this last weekend, is he's not going to take the presidential salary.
Yeah.
And that was compared to Hitler, because I guess Hitler did that too. This is straight out of the Hitler playbook, is what the article said. Okay.
They're absolutely the same person based on that. Yeah. I'm definitely convinced. I mean, Trump doesn't even have a mustache, so I don't know how you can begin to make comparisons like that.
It would probably look pretty bad if he did, too.
Yeah, it would look off, especially if it was that white, milky color that his hair is.
Yeah, and it would kind of, it'd blend into his orange skin, too. There wouldn't be a lot of contrast, so it wouldn't look very good.
I'm imagining it looking very wavy like his hair does. Just... like one of those sort of Mario mustaches.
By the way, explaining his hair was not anything I agreed to in appearing on this podcast, so don't try to get me with any of those gotcha questions.
I just need to delete some notes. So what I was going to ask next was, in your opinion, how did the media get this so wrong? And I'll preface that by saying that most of the mainstream publications that I not follow on Twitter, but they appear in the bubble in the Moments section or whatever that's called now on Twitter. Huffington Post is one which I do think is genuine garbage journalism. Like if I worked for Huffington Post and my parents were, or like someone asked my mum, like, oh, what does your son do? I would hope that she tells him that I'm dead rather than have the embarrassment of tell them that I work for the Huffington Post. But needless to say, they're significant in certain social circles, along with like numerous other, I'm pretty sure that MSN News, like places like that, specifically online publications, I think had sure things projected for Hillary Clinton, like that she was absolutely going to win. And
yeah,
like from an outsider perspective, to wake up on that morning and see that Trump had been, like, I was shocked, because everything that I was told up to that point had suggested otherwise, and I don't understand how they could have gotten it that wrong. Like, I'm sure it's a myriad of reasons that all combine into one, but would you like to talk about some? Yeah,
I can think of a few reasons, and honestly, speaking of reasons that kind of pushed me away from the way I used to vote, the media coverage of this was a large part of it, because it was so unfair. I was constantly put in the role of defending Trump, even though I'm not a huge Trump cheerleader, just because the treatment of him was so insanely unfair that it's just unacceptable. Like him or not, let's judge him on fair terms and on what he actually said as opposed to this gross distortion of it. But whatever happened, somehow the media lost track of its role as a reporter and as a provider of that neutral, factual information. And somehow they became the cheerleaders. They became cheerleaders for Hillary Clinton. And I think a few of the factors in play are that for whatever reason, the polling was a little bit off this time. I'll try to give them the benefit of the doubt and say they were working with the facts they had at first here. But
Yeah.
I think there's plenty of reason to think they were acting with more malice than just that. But let's say they were working just with what they had. The polling was a little bit off consistently. Not a lot of people go as far as to say the polling was rigged. I'm not going to go that far. But clearly there was some Trump interest, some Trump voters that weren't captured, because all the polling nationally or in states or in states that were competitive showed Hillary with 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5% lead, especially nationally, and that didn't turn out to be the case. So we're talking about maybe an error that's just a little bit outside the margin of error. I think a few things are to blame there. I do think there are shy Trump voters. We were talking previously about how everything is racist and sexist, and if you're a Trump voter, you're scum. And I think there are plenty of people who intended on and did vote Trump and just weren't going to tell anybody about it because of the social consequences. You wouldn't even tell a pollster. I'm not going to tell anyone. I'm just going to go check the box. I think there was some of that. And also just we could observe the enthusiasm this whole time. Trump's rallies were huge. Hillary can't get a few hundred people to show up. His voters were absolute 100%. I'm going to the polls. I don't care if a hurricane comes through. I'm going to the polls. And Hillary's were like, well, I guess I will. So the polling kind of lent itself to maybe some skewed reporting, but it's way worse than that. And the thing that really bugged me about this, you could see it happening. You could see media treatment of Trump just wildly unfair and kind of constantly cheerleading Hillary. And then WikiLeaks starts coming out, and we see these leaks from the Democratic National Committee, and we see these leaks from John Podesta, who was a Hillary campaign manager, and we get to look through these things. And there is all sorts of collusion with the Democratic Party and these media outlets. We're talking about things like having them read over stories to make sure that it's phrased in the way the candidate or the party likes. We're talking about Donna Brazile, who was at CNN and is now the interim chair of the DNC because the old chair was kicked out for rigging the primaries for Hillary, and now the new chair was caught sharing debate questions from CNN to Hillary Clinton prior to the debate. So there are all kinds of examples of these unethical relationships between media, between reporters, and between the candidate and the party. Now, we don't have that information available on the Republican side because that wasn't a leak that WikiLeaks provided. So, I mean, people like to say, well, they're doing that at Fox News. Maybe we don't have the evidence to suggest that, but let's just talk about the majority of the coverage that was going on. Sure, you have your Breitbarts, you have your Fox Newses, you have some of these right-wing places, but just you turn on the news, your NBC, ABC, your broadcast news, your mainstream journalism like that was just in the tank for Hillary, and then we have all this evidence to come out to show that it's not just our perception. There's behind the scenes deal making that is making this happen.
With those companies specifically, MSNBC and
specifically with CNN, and I know specifically with Politico.
Okay.
MSNBC, I can't give you a specific example right now, but MSNBC leans left anyway.
Yeah.
And NBC, ABC, George Stephanopoulos at ABC himself has been a major contributor to the Clinton Foundation. I mean, we have all kinds of relationships like that where it's not necessarily improper per se, but
it's shady.
There's reason to believe that. I mean, you're not going to be giving huge sums of money to the Clinton Foundation and then be a huge Trump guy, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to make the case that they all were terrible and they all did an awful job, but just speaking generally, this was not an election that was covered fairly, and I think the consequence is going to be. Well, I mean, we already see viewership tanking for a lot of these media outlets, and it's going to continue to tank because the people just want the truth.
Yeah. I think it's so funny the way Trump is now president, and if you look at his last like 6 tweets in a row, they're all like a huge fuck you to the New York Times, like tagging them in it and everything. Like,
Yeah, and then the New York Times even published that that letter from the editor, or from its editor to its readership, saying like,
subscribers, yeah. I had to read it
I mean, all
today.
they said was like, we didn't. I mentioned in a video, I called it an apology, and I think some people are disputing it as an apology because it doesn't actually apologize. Fair enough. What it does say is we definitely did not have an accurate gauge on the American public opinion, so we need to recommit ourselves to objective reporting and trying to be bias free and that sort of thing. So it is a mission that they don't get it at the bare minimum. They didn't listen to. They kind of existed within the echo chamber, is what they're admitting to.
Yeah, the thing that I found really insane since I've started reading up on this, because I've said in the build up to the election, I said lots of stuff on my channel about how like Donald Trump is just not great. That's putting it politely, but I'm nowhere near a fan of his. But I've had a sort of read of you know how since he won there's been all these like, oh, an open letter to my wife or whatever from different places.
Yeah.
One of them I read was from a writer who I really respect and really admire, and he said it was like an open letter to his wife, and he said, yeah, the fact that the people would rather vote in a rapist, racist, bigot. This was on like
Wait, calling Trump a rapist?
they said the word rapist, yeah, and I was
on
like,
what grounds?
I guess on the grounds that he has a trial coming up for that. Is it the 16th of December? He's gonna.
But that all got dropped.
Oh, is it dropped? Okay.
Yeah, conveniently, once the election's over, funny. It was, we're going to drop that.
Yeah, so I like whatever. If you think that he is a rapist, you cannot put that in a sentence where it's treated as a fact by you. Like,
right,
that's,
even if it is going to trial, even if
Yeah,
it still happens.
exactly.
You're exactly right. That's before any
So-
of that has been.
They said that. They
judged.
said racist, which again, this is a thing that I don't really think he is a racist, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Bigot, I don't think so either. Sexist, I could see why someone would think he's a sexist based on his sort of the way that he's treated women that he's been married to and the way he talks about women. Like, it wouldn't surprise me to learn that he was a sexist. I don't know how you'd quantify that kind of thing. Like, I don't think he's a misogynist or anything, but I do think that he has a sort of an older generational sort of opinion of women, if you know what I mean.
That could be the case. One thing that bothers me about the sexism allegations is they like to say things like, Trump called women pigs and women slobs. Is like, well, he called one very specific one a pig. I mean, he's called women names, but they are specific women who have done specific things to him. And I've called lots of people names in my life who have done specific things to me. It's because they've done those things, not because of their gender or their race or anything like that.
Yeah.
I will also, and I suspect we'll probably talk about this at some point here, but yeah, I definitely grant the premise he's not artful with his words. He's not precise with his words. Yeah. He's not an eloquent speaker, so he has a tendency to say things in a way that are blunt and they lend themselves to be taken in the way that you're describing. However, to the sexism allegation, the one thing that drives me nuts about the left is they fail to make a distinction between action and words. And I will grant the premise that his words are often not great. Yeah. But we also need to look at his action. And the reality is he has put a lot of women in a lot of leadership roles, often unprecedented leadership roles within his company. And he had Kellyanne Conway manage his campaign, the first female to manage a winning presidential campaign. That's a big deal, but they don't care about that because she doesn't fit the ideological mold.
Yeah,
she doesn't think the right way for a woman. So he has said bad things. He's also put women in influential positions that are historic, to be honest. So you have to consider that as well.
He could do all of that and still be sexist, though. Like, you know, if he thinks it's beneficial to him to put women in certain positions, he can still do it and still have the feeling that they're sort of beneath him or lesser than him, if you know what I mean.
I guess. I mean, but then it's a question of like, what does he want to win more? What wins the battle in his head? His desire to win or his desire to be sexist? I mean,
I'll come back to that later, but I suspect the truth is that even he doesn't know. But
that's I don't think Trump has a detailed, sophisticated understanding of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that is one thing about him that gives me pause. Even the things that I agree with him on, I'm not sure he gets it on the why part.
That's the
and
thing.
that makes me worry sometimes.
Yeah, I would not be comfortable living in a country where he's the president, and this isn't me trying to tell you how you should have voted or anything, so like please don't take it that way. It's just what my concerns would be if I were living in America. I think that you sort of have this mantra that you care only about intellectual honesty, so you're not interested in, like, say, social justice warriors going crazy about what they perceive to be the case and things like that. Like, you're encouraging people to dig deeper, essentially. The way that he talks, I think, is like just the first issue, just the way that, like, his cadence or something about the way that he speaks, like his repetition of these seemingly meaningless things, like it's sort of like unhinging. It's disconcerting in some way. Like
He has the best words. Have you not heard him speak? He has the best words, the greatest. Tremendous words.
I saw this
You're
comment.
not listening closely enough.
I saw this comment online that said, like, Donald Trump's first day in office, and he's being told that something is unconstitutional, and his response is, "I'll make my own constitution, beautiful constitution, with all the best laws." And I just laughed so hard at the idea of him
That's
doing
not far off from the truth.
I know.
But here's the thing. I do believe, and again, you talk about which way to vote. I will always put this in the context of which way to vote compared to what.
Yeah.
And I think about it this way. I trust him to surround himself with good people. I think most of the things he says have a bit of necessary truth in them, even if they're not stated super precisely.
Yeah.
But I would rather have someone who is kind of loose with the truth, like I think he is, versus someone who is very precise with lies and manipulation, which is what I believe Hillary Clinton to be.
That's fair. And I do think it can't be said that Hillary is like a bad politician or anything like that. And I completely understand that there's this wave of anti-establishment feeling and sentiment that's springing up everywhere. It's not unique to the States. It's happened in the UK with the Brexit vote. It's happening in Austria at the moment. I'm pretty sure France are about to vote in a right-wing president who is giving it the whole anti-establishment spiel as well. And it is happening in other places. And there is something to be said about that, because I think coming from the left, Hillary is a good choice because the left kind of craves stability in the sense that they do want to keep things the way they are, so that they can continue to be like, so that they can continue to be the ones pointing out all the problems, if you know what I mean, like how straight white men are the problem.
Okay. So they can point the finger elsewhere, but that's one big reason why they lost. And Ben
Yeah.
Shapiro makes this point that I find actually I agree with in full. And what's curious about this whole thing to me, like, I grant that Trump is not an ideal candidate, absolutely, and pretty much everyone I know who voted Trump would say the same thing, with rare exception. I know a few Trump cheerleaders who consider him God King or whatever, and they might make the case that he's Jesus's brother or something like that. But the reality is that the right, the Republican Party, conservatives, all them, there has been an intense battle this whole election season about Trump, and there's been a lot of splits and a lot of division and a lot of rivalries formed now among former friends of people who are kind of like me and they vote for Trump because they view it as the best option, and people who are never Trump and just opposed to him for a whole bunch of honestly valid reasons in their head. And so there's been this battle on the right this whole time. There really was no battle on the left, with some small exception, but they all basically just got in line. And even though, their candidate cheated the other one, Hillary Clinton cheated Bernie, the DNC cheated Bernie out of a fair process, and they still were expected to get in line and just support this person and uphold the stability that you were talking about. They didn't have that fierce battle, and I think that speaks to a flaw on the Democratic side, not a virtue.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. That's one of the things about Trump's campaign that I have looked back on with a sort of a a real like satisfied feeling of him like slaughtering every single like generic Republican candidate that he was up
Yeah.
against. Like he annihilated them all, and he didn't even do it using facts or like conventional methods or whatever. It's like he
Well, he's
just,
so great with that branding.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
my favorite moment of the entire election season was Trump debating, and he had Ted Cruz, I think, on his left, or Marco Rubio on his right. Forget, it might have been reversed, but he just, this guy's a liar and this guy's a choke artist, and we'd call him, Lion Ted and Little Marco, and those names would just stick.
yeah, Crooked Hillary. That's like a huge
yeah.
thing. I honestly think that on some sort of societal consciousness like level, that Trump saying Crooked Hillary and repeating it made it into even more of a fact than it already was. Like, I think it really embedded that perception with people who might not have even known. Like, we spoke earlier about how liberals will hear that something is racist and then say that's racist and that's how they think. And I'm sure that people on the right have done the same thing with Crooked Hillary and just, yes, of course she's crooked. Like, it's, I don't know, I just think there's something to be said about that. I don't think
Yeah.
it didn't have an effect on people. Like, it's very, very clever and manipulative and sort of, I don't know, just interesting, because you don't see things like that in politics regularly. But I think that would
Yeah.
be the case for a lot of what's happened during this presidential race.
Yeah, I mean, it worked. He's good at strategizing these things. It works for him in business, and it worked for him in politics. Now he gets the chance to actually do the detailed policy work. So we'll see how that goes.
That's the thing. Like, I don't even believe. I know that he is obviously has a level of intelligence. You do not become a billionaire without having to use your brain at certain points. I think he mastered the art of whatever it is he had to do to get to where he is. But the way that he is asked questions about specific issues by different people, and he gives completely opposing viewpoints on it, that sort of alarms me a little bit. But also, where the media, I think, really dropped the ball was the first moment that I remember actually thinking to myself, like, is Donald Trump a racist? And it was when he was, what was it, he was on trial, or there was some judge that he thought was trying to screw him over who was Mexican, and he was like,
yeah.
oh, well, he can't do it because he's Mexican. And like, what Trump was actually saying there was, well, look, I've just proposed this idea of building a huge wall that's annoyed an awful lot of Mexicans, so I don't think that this judge is in the right position to be judging me. And then someone said, like, what about a Muslim? And he was like, nah, probably not them either. And like, what he's saying again is, I've said things and proposed things that have been taken offensively by these sections of the community, and therefore I don't want a biased judge. Which is fine.
And that judge was part of La Raza too, which is kind of like an ethno advocacy group. Like, it's not just that he's Hispanic; it's also that he's kind of an advocate on behalf of the ethnicity. But this is another classic example, like you're saying. He didn't phrase it well, and the way Trump said it is not well stated. But there's that bit of truth behind it that perhaps, if articulated by someone more thoughtful, would be better received. But that's, I don't know. If you want that from him, we're never going to get it, I don't think.
I know, but that's the thing, is that the media took that and they were like, oh, look, he's a racist. But instead they should have been like, look, this guy doesn't understand how the judicial system works. Like, he wants to be able to pick and choose judges based on, like, their ethnicity. Or like, can you imagine setting that kind of precedent for any case? Like, imagine a civil case where a woman is like, well, I can't do this because a man is a judge. Like, it's such an idiotic thing to say, but the media was like, oh, well, racism is involved, so let's get, and that furthered this narrative that Trump is a racist. And then you have people on the left who are like literally depressed. People are crying and like vomiting and all sorts because he's elected, because they think that 59 million Americans are racist. And this is, like, that, as I said to you before we started recording, that was the turning point for me, where I realized, like, something's wrong here. Like, something's rotten about this if we honestly are going to attempt to perpetuate this notion or this myth that there are 59 million racist Americans who are burning crosses and like,
it doesn't explain so many things. It doesn't explain people like me who voted for the black guy twice and decided that that didn't necessarily work out, and that side has gotten too crazy. So I'm going to try to correct the pendulum a little bit and vote for this guy. Nothing to do with race on my part. There's tons of people like me. It doesn't explain Pennsylvania. It doesn't explain Ohio. It doesn't explain Michigan, Wisconsin. These states that voted for Obama twice and now voted for Trump. I mean, did everybody just suddenly become racist in those states? And how? How did that happen?
Even giving the Ku Klux Klan the level of coverage they've given is like,
Oh, God.
I can't even express, like, I know this, and I am an outsider to American culture, whatever. The Ku Klux Klan are an inconsequential, like, group of, like, rednecks, and I say that as someone who, right, I understand that if you're a black man who lives within the vicinity of the Ku Klux Klan, I know they're not inconsequential, but I mean in terms of their public reach, their influence, like, their ability to, like, you know, court people to vote for one section, like they're just a bunch of disorganized racists who put on a hood every now and then and light things on fire. Like, they've been the same for the last, I don't know, 20 years, and all of a sudden, because Donald Trump said something that someone decided was racist, we have to give all this coverage to the KKK.
Yeah. And it's so dumb. I mean, they always go on this argument that, like, they endorsed him, or David Duke, the guy running from Louisiana, who I guess is a former KKK member or current, or I don't know what his history is, but I guess you could, you know, qualify him certainly at least as a white nationalist. They endorsed Trump, and it's like, well, anyone can endorse anyone, first off, but second off, why does it surprise you? The KKK probably agrees with conservatives on issues like border security that aren't racist. We just agree that we have too many leaks and we need to fix the leaks. And the KKK can agree on that. So they endorse, like, just because an endorsement mean, like, Donald Trump's not taking some KKK backwoods guy's endorsement and being like, I heard all of his ideas and I imported them into my platform. Has nothing to do with anything. And they don't, I mean, Hillary has a history with the KKK. She was friends with Robert Byrd, who was associated with the KKK. I mean, this is the example I always use too. Omar Mateen's dad, the guy who shot up the Orlando Pulse nightclub in June, that shooter's dad, that terrorist's dad, got on stage with Hillary this summer in Tallahassee, Florida. Might have been Orlando or Tallahassee. I can't remember. But I mean, no KKK Grand Wizard is on stage with Trump. Now, I believe it was a mistake on the part of the Hillary campaign. I think what they did was, like, put the people behind her on stage and say, hey, there's a brown guy, get him up here. They don't vet these people. They just want it to look diverse. So that's how he got there, I would assume. But I don't think Hillary, I don't see that and assume Hillary supports shooting up gay nightclubs and being an Islamic terrorist. Hillary supports that. I think, wow, that's an unfortunate mistake, but clearly they're not the same person.
Yeah,
so
I do understand on a surface level why it's say troubling to people. Like, if I found out that the KKK supported the football team that I support, I would be worried. But going around and saying, like, okay, this, it's the way they're like, oh, and these people voted for the guy endorsed by the KKK. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, that's not got any weight behind it. That's just a thing that you're saying. It's literally, like, the laziest way of drawing a line between someone you don't like and something that can stain their character. It's so, like, inconsequential and just nothingness. Like, it's not an argument for anything or an example of anything.
There's so much intellectual laziness on the left now, and it's gotten exposed, thank God. I think this election was a big time exposure of it, and they're going to have to come to the debate table with better ideas and better arguments next time, and that's great. I really do want to make the left great again in this country. It's not necessarily because I want to, it's not necessarily because I think they're right or because I want to go back or anything like that. I just always want good ideas and good arguments competing. Yeah. And I want to make the left great again so that they bring the strongest case to the table, and we get to pick the best ideas based on that competition. And they're not bringing anything right now. They're bringing what you described. Oh, KKK and racist, so I don't have to debate new points. No, sorry.
Yeah, it's such a backwards way of, like, I think something's rotten at the core of the left, where it's been very good for a long time to be a liberal, in the sense that, like, Obama was in power, and it's really good when your guy is the guy who's calling the shots and stuff. But there's just this sort of, for starters, I think there's a huge disregard for impoverished white people, and like I don't think that they get a fair right at all in certainly what I consider to be like American media, or what at least what I understand of American media. I don't ever see anybody sympathizing with white underclass people.
I don't know if you caught this. I mean, it's so spoiled to exactly what you're describing. It's so spoiled that our own socialist who ran, Bernie Sanders, our own Democratic socialist who ran and damn near beat Hillary, and possibly could have if the system wasn't so corrupt. He, on stage, I mean, he has been co-opted by these people, and on stage, he actually said, if you're white, you don't know what it means to be poor.
I did see that, yeah, I did. That was
awful.
That was a disqualifying sort of statement for a lot of people. Like, it's completely, like, false, but also it's pandering. It's so, yeah. I don't know, it's just drenched in this, like, falsehood, and I don't know, like, how can you, because he's spoken up so much for like the working class, but he didn't get any support from the white working class, and it's because of things like that where he's, I don't know, like, it's because you can't say nowadays that, well, white people are poor too, because it seems so excluding of other people, if you know what I mean. Like, I don't know, it's so strange to put your finger on, but I mean, it is unfortunate. I mean, exactly what you're describing is a lot of the reason why I've always voted for the Democratic Party too, because there is a lot of economic inequality that perhaps we should address. And I previously saw, I thought that the government, and maybe still do think that the government has a role in providing good opportunity where the private sector fails. And I could be persuaded of that probably again in the future. Yeah.
But it's been co-opted by this identity politics garbage, like you're talking about. I don't care. I mean, I do care about working poor. I care about that a lot. What I don't care about is dividing them up into, well, this one's black and this one's white and this one's gay and this one's straight. I don't care about that. I just want people to have good opportunity.
Yeah,
but they do care about that.
It's a sort of innate positive discrimination that it makes you favor one group over another. And in the wake of Trump winning the presidency, like, I've looked up a lot of stuff. Like, I was reading this blog post from a white guy who said, okay, look, I've had all these feelings for a long time, but I didn't post them because I was too afraid of being called a Trump supporter. But whatever, I voted Democrat all my life. I'm disabled. I'm in the underclass. I earn just enough money to keep myself alive, but not enough to provide or to afford Obamacare. So that's left me in this position where I'm completely trapped. I can't really do anything with my life, and I don't feel like I'm going anywhere, and I just work on paycheck to paycheck and pray that nothing gets worse in my condition because I won't be able to afford. And, like, that's a person who exists. Like, it's not racist to be concerned about that person's well-being and to think, like, well, we need to do something about this, like, because you do, like, that is, sure, like, I do believe that there's something to be said about black people being a permanent underclass, economically speaking, in America. Like, I have read a lot about how the sort of annals of racism have seeped into modern society. True, nobody's fault apart from the racism that existed in the past, but it can be so hard to recover from that sort of trauma. Like, we do see it in Ireland too. Like, we've had huge historical like battles with the UK, and there are huge sections of Irish Catholic homes in the north that are sort of, they haven't quite gotten to a level playing field yet, and things like that, which they've only just started correcting in the last 5 years or so. But I do think that happens to black people in America. I don't doubt that for some black people it is harder to be like a white person in the same community because of things that are not quite quantifiable. Like, you can't use statistics to show it, but there's some sort of societal understanding of, certain conditions or things like that. Like, I think that exists.
I would be much more receptive. I do agree that there are observable inequities, of course, and I would be receptive to some of the things that you're saying. And could be, however, Black Lives Matter is absolutely not the correct prescription for the problem. And the only reason I would say that, and the thing that would make me more the things you're saying, is we have cultivated a culture, or Black Lives Matter has cultivated a culture that is nothing but the finger pointing we were talking about earlier. There is no, if you go to Black Lives Matter, their website right now, and we did this on the podcast a while back, because I was like, maybe I haven't given them a fair shake. Maybe if I go read some of their stuff, there are parts where they get a little bit introspective, and maybe they say, like, in addition to creating the good opportunity we need to succeed, we also need to be honest about some of the cultural rot that has happened, that has lent itself to this type of the poor conditions that we're in right now. So I went on there, I look at the family section, things like that. I think, and I'm hoping maybe they'll talk about the crime rate, and maybe they'll talk about the crime in the black community. Maybe they'll talk about the decline or the decay of the black family at fatherless households. And if they were upfront about some of those things, about some of the cultural problems that are creating or contributing to a lot of the problems you're describing, I'd be so much more receptive to it. But instead, you go in there, and the thing it says is that the nuclear family is a Western prescribed patriarchal structure. So they don't even see like fatherless households as a problem. They actually just want to blow up the family entirely. They don't talk about the crime rate at all. They don't talk about these things that plague their community that cultural reform would help to address. So I'm definitely willing to embrace the idea that we as a society can do more things to help people get a leg up, to pursue success. But I need groups like this, these factions of the left, to just come to the table with a little bit of introspective analysis, with a little bit of saying, here's some things that we could improve on to help achieve this goal. And they'll never do it. It's always, you do this for me, it's your fault, you do that for me, and I'm just going to sit here and wait for you to do that. I just can't get on board with that stuff.
I do think in the black community there was a huge movement in the 90s to completely stop black on black crime. Like I remember, because I'm a huge hip hop fan, and I just remember that being like one of the forefronts of that kind of music was stop black on black crime. We need to sort of unite, and we need to like better ourselves and all of that kind of thing. But I also think that when you have a permanent economic underclass, there are so many factors that contribute to that exact type of lifestyle, like those fatherless households and crime. Like the main cause of crime is lack of education and poverty. Like those are the things.
Right. So the question is the opportunity insufficient? And I am persuaded that in this country, if you come from a poor urban black community, and you want to go to school, and you want to work hard and make the best version of yourself, there are so many avenues of opportunity available to you, and responsibility to take advantage of them. You will get into a school, you will receive federal aid, and if you study hard, you will get good grades. And by the way, if you're an African American who graduates top of his class in a STEM field, you're going to get a good job.
But do you not think that maybe for like some people might not even be aware of those opportunities because the education, the poverty is so poor?
Oh yeah, and I'm fully willing to grant that the way we've structured our schools, I don't know how it works in Europe or in Ireland or elsewhere. We need to do something about public schools for K through 12 here, because the schools are kind of a product of the neighborhood, the way it works here, the way public school funding works. So if you live in a really terrible neighborhood, you're going to get really terrible schools that go along with that. And so, I want to qualify with what I said too. Like, it's hard to do exceptionally well K through 12 to get into a great college if your K through 12 school is garbage. So that's an area where we could probably do better as a society to try to, I don't know what reforms we'd have to do, but we're going to have to get good schools into neighborhoods that are not in great shape. Yeah,
that's definitely interesting to hear. I guess we're kind of running out of time here. One thing I really wanted to ask you is, what do you think Donald Trump's America is going to look like? Because he said a lot of, quite frankly, insane things. Like he sort of set forward his list of policies from the start that were to build a giant wall and to, what was it, to like evict or deport 11 million illegals in like some ridiculously short window of time.
So he's talking about, I guess, 2 to 3 illegal immigrants now, and these are the immigrants that are, I guess, going to be prioritized are the ones who have committed crime beyond the criminal act of entering this country illegally. Okay. So that I guess would be a priority. The wall he talked about on 60 Minutes as a priority. So I would expect that to get some legislative push. We'll see where it goes. I mean, he doesn't have any obstacles. This is the interesting thing. I mean, I guess I'll say what I expect the priorities to be would be the wall, the deportations like you're talking about. There's also going to be a big push to modify and or repeal and replace our healthcare law, which is, as you referenced earlier, is not necessarily working for a lot of people. It was designed to work. And I come from a perspective of believing we got to do everything we can to make sure people have access to manageable, affordable care.
Yeah.
So, and I think everybody shares that goal. So we're going to have to restructure that. And currently it's leaving a lot of people getting the screw, like the guy you described earlier. So we'll have to figure that out. That's what I would expect to be the priorities. But the interesting thing here is that he doesn't have a lot of obstacles. He's got Republican control in the House and in the Senate, and he's gonna put at least one person out of the court, possibly more. We basically have an obstruction-free track for this president, which, if you really hate Trump, maybe you view that as a bad thing because you don't want him. You don't want some of the things he's talked about even to be tried. But even if you don't like him, the good news is here these ideas are going to be put to the test, and if they suck like you think they do, they'll fall, and we'll get to try some other stuff that you might want to try and. Next time around. So I think this is actually kind of a win-win for everybody because we're going to find out, or we should be able to find out in this term here, what sort of situation these policies, what sort of circumstance or what sort of country they build, I suppose. And I think it's a worst case for everyone, even though we want checks and balances in our government. We want limited government. We want a slow process so nothing sweeping takes over in crazy fast fashion or anything like that. But if we just had 4 years of Trump where all he had really was the power to stand at his podium and just kind of advocate as opposed to actually take action, yeah, we don't really get any further in the debate because we don't know if those ideas would be successful or not. So he's going to get these things are going to be put to the test, and I think that's kind of a win for everybody. Either they succeed and he was right, or they don't, and we get to try something else.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of gloating if that happens, I think.
Yeah.
I was going to say something else that just sort of happened in the last few days since we laid out the format for this, and that's that Steve Bannon was brought in as... I don't know anything about... I know Breitbart, the website, and I know that they sort of court a lot of, let's say, like segments of the alt-right, or I know that their headlines are deliberately inflammatory to get you to click on it, and I understand that. All I have seen on my timelines is that Steve Bannon is a white supremacist and that he's anti-Semitic and he's a racist, right? And usually when that happens, it usually happens with, like, say, an artist or a musician or whatever that I like, and I'll hear that they're racist, and I'll go onto their Wikipedia page, go to the controversy section, and click on the articles that reference these allegations. So that doesn't exist with Steve Bannon, so instead I Google Steve Bannon racism, and all I'm finding is articles that are like, and Steve Bannon, who is a racist, and like I haven't seen why. I want to know why people think he's a racist, and I am genuinely trying to find examples of it, and I can't, and I think that this is a problem, because he may very well be a racist, and he may very well have been on camera calling someone like a whatever kind of derogatory term, and it may just be buried in the mountain load of articles that are just saying that he's a racist and not saying why. And that's a huge problem to me. Like, I take great issue with that because it's stopping me from learning, and it's instead telling me how I'm supposed to think, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I think that should annoy you. And if I had the good answer on why he's a racist, I would tell you, as far as I can tell, I think it's another one of those by association things. I think I've heard there was like a tape of him. He has his own like bus tape, I guess. Like maybe 10 years ago, he said something that was like... something that was skeptical of the Jews or something. I don't know. These are all, there's nothing that's obvious. And a lot of the times the association that's made is just the association to Breitbart itself. Well, who's the star of Breitbart, really? I mean, Milo has risen to the star of Breitbart at this point. Milo's a gay Jew. I don't know if Steve Bannon, the anti-Semite, is going to put a gay Jew in such a position of power and allow him to rise to be a star. And then they associate him with Breitbart all the time, and they like to act like it's this tiny alt-right white supremacist corner of the internet. But I think it's the most shared news source on Facebook at this point is Breitbart. So that's not to say everything they publish is right or correct, but you run into the same problem of, if it's just by association with Breitbart, are we really? All the people sharing stuff and talking about it on Facebook, are they all racist too? I mean, we have this huge society of racists and white supremacists and anti-Semites that are sharing this stuff all over.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I mean, I like you, I welcome the evidence. I've seen very flimsy evidence so far, and if it's out there, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But like you, I can't really find it.
The thing I saw today was somebody on my timeline saying, well, look at his ex-wife's, what was it, like her dialogue in the divorce settlement or something like that. And it was like, make up your own mind. And I was like, yeah, I would love to read this and believe it to be true. But at the end of the day, he was found not guilty. And nothing has come of these allegations. So that's not to say that they're not substantial in some way, but if they happened in front of a judge and the judge or the jury or whatever have decided it's not significant enough to, it's just not, you can't just say just because he has been labeled a racist that he is one. And again, I'm saying he genuinely could well be, but I haven't seen the evidence, and therefore I can't put my foot to the floor on this and say, God damn it, he's a racist and we have to get him out.
My guess is this is just another small representation of election in general, another representation of why they lost and why they're fools to double down on these things even after the electoral loss. Because I bet a lot of this is very much similar to the stuff you were describing earlier with the Hispanic judge or some of the things Trump has said about women, where I'm sure if we go down this rabbit hole, we will find a quote, whether it was yesterday or possibly 15 years ago, where Steve Bannon maybe said something that is questionable. And of course, we probably won't be provided the full context of the statement. So maybe there's something loosely questionable out there, and it is being drummed up by this mass hysteria of people on a witch hunt for racism and sexism and bigotry. That has been the story of this entire election cycle, and that's why they lost. And I'm guessing the people who haven't learned that, who haven't spent the time being introspective to figure out why they lost, are just going to keep doubling down on this crap. And Steve Bannon is the latest victim, if you want to call it victim, but that's my guess. I welcome somebody with hard evidence to prove me wrong.
So how much control is Mike Pence going to actually have in the White House? This is something that I don't fully understand. Like, I know, as we said earlier, if Trump dies or I have this theory that's obviously a lot of people would agree with me, that Donald Trump ran for president to promote his book, and it's kind of gotten a bit out of hand now, and he realizes
it backfired.
Yeah, like he actually won. Like it seemed at one point like he was doing everything he could to disqualify himself from the presidency, and yet he still managed to win. So a lot of people suspect that Trump hired Mike Pence as his sort of, all right, look, man, I'm in way over my head here and I need a bit of guidance. And he went to Mike Pence for that guidance. I don't believe that Donald Trump is anti-LGBT at all. I don't think he cares either way. I think he's totally fine with people being gay. And I think him waving that LGBT flag, and as well him promising to defend the LGBTQ against foreign invaders to a chorus of applause from the Republicans, and then him stepping back and saying, as a Republican, it is so good to hear you applaud that. Those were sort of really interesting moments for me in the campaign, because Mike Pence, as we know, is in favor, or at least was at one point in favor, of gay conversion therapy, which is a really questionable, and in a lot of ways, I've read first-hand accounts of gay conversion therapy. I read one I think 5 years ago on Cracked or something like that. That obviously paints it in a very negative light. I mean, I think it is a really inhumane thing to do to a person anyway, like cultural difference or not. But I think Mike Pence definitely has some anti-homosexual tendencies or leanings, and that worries me a little bit, because I feel as though maybe Mike Pence will have more control or more input than the average VP does. Do you think that that's possible? Or?
Well, I would. I mean, the vice president role is very minimal. So as a practical matter, he really doesn't have much. Does he have access to the president? Sure. But I mean, let's presume worst case scenario, like you're saying, where the power that he has is basically kind of a minimized version of, it's a minuscule version of the power that the president has, which is maybe some influence. So the president, of course, has the power to sign things into law, to issue executive orders, to do a lot of things that the vice president just doesn't do unless he becomes president. But even if we presume that he has a lot of influence with the president and a lot of influence with legislators, I mean, on the issue of gay marriage in this country, that's been decided by the court, and that's a year and a half old now.
Yeah.
Even if they were to stack the court with justices who would overturn that and return it to the states, I got to think a lot of states, given that they've been granting marriage certificates to same-sex couples for a year and a half, maybe some states would want to go back on that now. And like, I don't know what you do. Do you nullify the ones that you gave out? Do you grandfather those in? It just creates a mess for them that I'm not sure they're interested in anyway. So plus I don't know that to get that reconsidered by the Supreme Court, a state would have to challenge it again anyway. I'm not convinced, given the mess it would create, a state would want to do that given where we are now. So I think that's unlikely. If you talk about some of the things like the religious freedom law that he had in Indiana, I mean, you're not going to do that at the federal level. And I don't even think that you could, to be honest. I mean, like I said, Mike Pence comes from a states' rights philosophy. And I can't imagine him trying to impose these sorts of things on other states, because his whole philosophy is, Indiana is my state, and in Indiana, this is how we've decided we want to run things. So federal government, don't tell me in Indiana how to run Indiana. Well, I can't imagine him then going to the federal government and saying, okay, okay, California, you very liberal state, guess what? You're going to stop all your pro-gay stuff. I mean, I guess maybe if he wanted to try to do something like that, but he doesn't have the power to do it, and he'd be a huge philosophical hypocrite for doing it. So I think the Mike Pence hysteria is way, way overblown. But, I've been wrong about a lot of things this year, so we'll see. I don't think there's going to be some anti-gay. But it's just not where the country's at, public opinion-wise either.
Yeah.
Certainly on the issue of marriage. Now, when you get into these religious freedom areas, it gets a little dicier, because then you have kind of competing interests. But just on the general question of, should gay people be able to live the same quality of life that you can and have the same legal rights and access to the same services that you can, this country is mostly in a place that says yes, with rare exceptions. So you are essentially going against the will of the people at that point too.
Yeah, so like you're talking about a serious insurrection on levels that have never before been seen from Mike Pence to... Yeah,
plus they just weren't elected on that. I mean, it's Donald Trump's presidency, and he was elected on issues that really have nothing to do with the LGBT stuff. That was rarely discussed. And like you said, when it was pro. I mean, it was rainbow flags and stuff. It wasn't, let's take things away and take away rights and all that.
There's something about that I really like. I don't really know if I can put it into words, but it's sort of this, I don't know if you ever get it, when there's someone that you strongly disagree with on almost everything, but then you find that middle ground, and it's sort of like, I don't know, it just makes you feel good when you agree with someone about something. I don't know if you know what I mean.
And you should, because it shows you're not like a rigid ideologue, or you're a person that's capable of separating issues out and taking each issue on its own, and you're able to separate the issue and the message from the messenger. It's very good to see someone like Donald Trump, and I gather you probably don't like him very much, but you're still taking everything he says and proposes on its own. You're not saying, well, Donald Trump said it, so it must be wrong. Let me figure out how it's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that is something that's really important. But I also feel like I'm an adult. Of course I think like that. Like, it's so ludicrous to not think like that.
You would think.
Yeah, I know.
You need to come visit some college campuses in this country sometime.
I would rather not if they sound anything like what we've been talking about. Just real quick, I know we're running rapidly out of time here. How do you think his presidency is going to affect foreign relations? By which I mean he's kind of said a lot of things about... one thing from a Eurocentric point of view, he said at one point that NATO was a terrible deal for America, and that he seemed very against NATO, right? Which worried me, because NATO and strict EU barriers to trade for Russia are pretty much the only thing that's keeping Russia at bay. Like they went into Crimea. They've always had this sort of thing about I guess, just wanting more control. Like, they went into Georgia as well. And this is in the last few years. Like, I think Russia are kind of a threat. They're doing a lot of strange things. I don't know if you're familiar with a guy called Vladislav Surkov, who works in the Kremlin. He's one of Putin's main advisors. But he's invented this new form of political engineering that's so unpredictable, and it's really hard to know what their intentions are. Like, they're in Syria at the moment, and as far as I can tell, nobody really understands why they're even in Syria. So from a Eurocentric point of view, I sort of fear that quest for power that they're on, and I fear, after Brexit, I fear the power of a fractured EU, and what Trump proposes would be a defunded NATO to keep that power at bay. And I just worry that, now this is like real tinfoil hat stuff almost, or maybe it's just overly succumbing to the fear mongering, but I do worry about his friendship with Vladimir Putin, or at least the way that Vladimir Putin is very obviously playing Donald Trump, and the way that Donald Trump just doesn't understand that that's happening to him. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I will grant, in the interest of full disclosure here, international relations and international politics are definitely not a strong suit for me. So, take what my view with a grain of salt, to be honest, because I'm not well versed on a lot of facts in the international context. But I will say this: I think I can entertain the possibility that Vladimir Putin is not a great guy on his own merits, and But considering him in context, I think that the left here has gotten hysterical about that relationship. And yeah, I mean, one of the main points against Hillary Clinton was her hostility to Putin in the context of Syria, context of some of the conflicts in the Middle East. And the way I perceive this is, Putin and Putin's Russia might not be great, but the reality is they are also a nuclear power, and the reality is we share the goal of defeating something that I view as much, much worse in ISIS and some of the jihadism that exists in the Middle East. So if it means being slightly too cozy or friendly with Putin in the interest of not having nuclear tension and defeating what I view as a very serious cultural, possibly existential threat to the United States in ISIS, I'm okay with that. And I mean, we've been allied with Russia in the past to fight the greater evil, and in this case, I kind of view that in sort of the same way. I don't think being friends with Russia in the context of fighting a common enemy is the worst thing ever. And if there are differences to sort out after, I'm fine with that. But like I said, take my analysis loosely, because I just don't have a detailed understanding of a lot of the facts in play here. I just see one enemy of the United States, and I think, that to tackle that. So anyone who's friendly with us in that regard is cool. Is cool in that context. And then, of course, I also see someone with weapons that could destroy us. And if we can be friends with people with weapons who can destroy us, that's also cool.
Yeah,
I know that's kind of a simpleton outlook, but that's the way I view it. And it's perhaps more complex than that.
I guess, finally, what do you think about Trump actually eliminating ISIS? Because he definitely did a lot of flexing and a lot of detracting, too, I feel. I don't think he's fully educated on ISIS. I don't think he really even knows what ISIS is. Like, there's been a lot of times that I've read where he has sort of displayed like what I would perceive to be a lack of understanding on global issues in general, but specifically, I don't think he knows what's really happening in Syria. I don't think I know that he knows that ISIS are terrorists, and I think that's probably the sort of length of what he actually thinks about them. I don't know what his proposals are or anything like that. Like, do you think he stands a chance of eliminating them?
Oh yeah, he has a secret plan to eliminate them. He just couldn't tell anybody because he doesn't want to tell me. He's had the secret greatest best plan for like a year and a half or more now. He wouldn't tell Obama either. The secret plan. I have faith in the secret plan.
That's good.
Like you, I don't. To be completely honest, I have not or seen or read a specific plan from him yet to take out ISIS. And I think, seriously speaking, part of that is because it is actually secret. I'm not even joking about that part.
Yeah, of course.
Which is a kind of a bad thing, but here's the thing about Trump and political Islam in general. And I don't know what the situation is like in Europe, but in this country, it's very clear that political Islam, and especially the variety that is practiced, the barbaric variety that is practiced by ISIS, is as a serious threat to not only our culture, but it's incompatible with free, secular, democratic society. So they, at a fundamental level, want to destroy everything we stand for. And there's the left in this country, in the interest of pursuing the tolerance and the open-mindedness and the acceptance that they're always going on and on and on about, has refused to talk about this in the context of Islam, the ideology. And so Trump has been the one candidate willing to stand up there and talk about political Islam or radical Islam or whatever you want to talk about, however you want to characterize the idea that is Islam, that is antagonistic or is an enemy to the things that we stand for, not only in this country, but the things that we stand for globally. So just his honesty, to be honest, just his honesty about what the problem is, was attractive to people like me.
Yeah.
Because the alternative in Hillary Clinton is someone to say like, well, terror has no religion. Okay. I mean, there's a clear motivating force here, and we need to be honest about what's going on. So I'm not aware of a sophisticated plan from Trump, and I would like to see one, and I would like to read one. But I'm comfortable with starting at a point of honesty, of intellectual honesty, and being like, if we agree on diagnosing the problem here, we can sort out a plan of attack. With the opposing party, they don't agree on the diagnosis of the problem. ISIS has nothing to do with Islam. That's just that they're just a perverted form of it. Okay, well, we can sit here and talk about which polite words to use and the semantics of this, or we can actually get to the heart of the issue. And the bar is always much lower for Trump, whether that's fair or not. But in this case, like, him just using the right words, being honest with the right words, is sufficient for me, compared to the alternative. And like I said, it's always compared to the alternative.
Yeah, because every time you say that, I want to be like, but what about? And then you're like, well, it compared to, and I'm like, okay. Just because of, I don't know, the fact that Trump has just said so many things, so many contradictory things, and so many things huge things, great things, beautiful things, that I just don't know if I can, I don't know if I can imagine a situation where I wouldn't be alarmed by what I'd perceive to be like a lack of understanding of just basic level politics and sort of what's happening in the world around him and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, it's...
I totally understand, and I share that concern. And like I said, the choice is someone who seems a little bit uninformed or not keen on the details versus someone who is very keen on half-truths or outright lies. Like someone I guess this would be the difference. I am not convinced Trump is trying to manipulate me. I think at worst he just is kind of intellectually absent, which is not good.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's trying to manipulate me. The alternative is someone I'm convinced is trying to manipulate me and the American populace, and I think there's sufficient evidence to demonstrate that. So you would like a situation like I was talking about earlier, make the left great again. I'd like a situation where we're choosing between, like, I don't know, filet mignon and I don't know, what's some fancy dinner you could choose. you want two excellent choices on the menu, and you're going to choose from two excellent choices. Instead, we have Trump, who's kind of like a few-day-old peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then you have Hillary, that's like spoiled milk. You know, one definitely is going to make you sick.
Do you have time for just one more question?
Yeah, for sure.
What would your biggest fear have been if Hillary were to be elected? Like, what's the worst case scenario there for you? Because obviously you don't think much of her, and and her like motives are unclear to you. Like, what do you think that she would do, if you know what I mean?
Truthfully, the thing I could speak to the issues of her corruption, which I think are really bad, her collusion with the media and kind of bad relationships she's had all over that I worry would just get worse if she was president. But honestly, the things that she said that worry me the most are some comments that I think are kind of hostile to Bill of Rights values, and our constitutional values. And actually, there was one point at which Trump agreed with her too in the debate that just bugged the hell out of me. But I think that she is part of I worry. See, this is where it gets a little bit sticky too, because if I'm going to be honest, Trump has said some things about constitutional values that bug me too. Like Trump has said, we're going to tighten up libel laws and make it, we're going to be able to sue all these reporters who say bad things, which gives me pause on First Amendment values, free speech values.
Plus, what are those libel laws? That, like, what law specifically is he talking about there that he can tighten up in order to sue the media for saying, like, that doesn't exist?
I don't think he knows, to be honest. But what he's talking about in concept. But Hillary has said some things, and it's part of this culture on the left that, in my view, is hostile to First Amendment principles, free speech principles, in that we're going to, these certain words are going to be off the table. We're going to word police, and we're going to make sure that hate speech is not okay, and all of these kind of ambiguous things they say that aren't anti-First Amendment in law yet, but we're seeing the breeding of that culture that starts to bring the values that are the First Amendment into play, and Trump is a middle finger to that. She also said at one of the debates, she's big on this no-fly zone, or no-fly, no-buy as far as our Second Amendment rights are concerned. So if you're on a terror watch list, you're going to be banned from purchasing a firearm, which access to which is guaranteed under our Second Amendment. The thing that worries me about that is not just, and Trump agreed with that, which I think if another mind got to him and said, you should walk that back, he might. But what bothers me about that is not just guns, even though I do think that your right to self-preservation is something we need to protect. What bothers me about that is she's saying that we think your constitutional rights, the rights that are the government is not to touch, they're not given to you, they're inalienable rights that the government is not to touch. We think those should be suspended at the whim of a bureaucrat because we say so without due process. If you're on the terror watch list, you haven't been accused of a crime, you haven't gone through the judicial process, you haven't been convicted of any. There's no assessment of guilt made. It's just some bureaucrat at the federal level has said, I think this guy is maybe a terrorist. Okay, so we're going to start taking away constitutional rights because someone at the federal level has decided that you're shady. That makes me wildly uncomfortable, and it's people like to think about that as a gun issue, and on a surface level it is, but it's so much more than that. If you
that's
believe
very interesting. I'd never thought of it that way before, ever. Like, to me, like, I was like, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. But when you put it like that, and you do put it into the concept, or the context of it infringing, like, that does make a lot of sense to me, even though I might not necessarily agree with it on a surface level, as you said, because it's a gun issue. But yeah, you
and
are
maybe you dispute the Second Amendment, and a lot of people do. I mean, I think the people who are kind of opponents of the way guns work in this country, I think the honest ones just question the amendment itself, as opposed to trying to say, no, I'm in favor of the amendment. We're going to kind of carve away at it in all these different ways. We can debate whether the amendment is a worthwhile thing to have. What we can't debate, like I was saying, what's enshrined in the Constitution is not just willy-nilly take it away if someone at the federal level says so. No, these are things the government is not to touch. And I don't care if someone thinks that you have terrorist associations. I'm just not comfortable with that, because it's just one guy's call. Or someone in the FBI says so. Sorry, your constitutional rights are suspended. No, not down with that.
Yeah, I completely get that too. That's a perfectly rational way of looking at it. Thank you very much for appearing on the podcast. This was awesome.
Yeah, man, this was a great discussion.
Yeah, it was very enlightening, and I really hope that, like, the people listening at least will sort of I don't know, make up your own mind, definitely, but try and keep an open mind with the way that media is sort of phrased and the way it's targeted at you and stuff like that. I think that's really important. But yeah, dude, I really appreciate you coming on. It was awesome.
Well, thanks a lot.
I stare at the stars and the sky up above and think, what am I made of? Am I full of sorrow? Am I hurt and pain? Or am I filled with love? I walk by myself on the streets below and ask every child I know, do you think tomorrow will bring sun or rain? Which one of these will show? I can't say goodbye to yesterday, my friend. I keep holding on till the end. Out of the darkness, there is no other way than the light leading to yesterday. It's there that I'll find inner peace, not war, and dreams that I let slip away. I'll find the joyfulness I'm looking for way back in yesterday.
So that was the 72nd edition of the Midnight Hour. I really hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. If you did and you want to show that you enjoyed it, if you want to leave a repost or a like on SoundCloud, that would be awesome, or a like on YouTube, or leave a rating and a nice review on iTunes, because why not? Also, some breaking news. I may or may not have some merchandise coming up in the next couple of weeks. I'm not too sure. I'm going on holiday soon, and I don't know how that's going to affect the Midnight Hour schedule, but obviously you guys know I have been committed to consistent uploads and been doing a pretty good job of that lately, so hopefully that'll continue. I'm not too sure, but I am going for like 2.5 weeks, so that might lead to some sort of problem. But anyway, regarding the actual episode itself, I'm very happy with how it turned out. I wasn't really sure what I was expecting going into it, but Matt is actually a very open-minded guy and is also open to things like being wrong and questioning yourself and things like that. And that's something that I really respect. Like, I really believe that if I were to come at him with like several arguments about why he's wrong about something, I just don't think he's the type of guy that would be like, well, no, fuck you. Like, I don't think the guy even gets angry. But yeah, hopefully you guys can check out his stuff too. I think a lot of the stuff that he says is in a kind of a bold contrast to what I say, but I think there's a lot of middle ground there too, and that kind of interests me because, like I said in the intro, I don't want to be stuck to one set of beliefs just because I'm tribalistically inclined to do so. Like, I just don't think that really makes sense as a way of behaving. Is tribalistically a word, or is it just tribally? Anyway, thanks for listening to the episode, and thanks for your continued support and everything. We're ending the episode with Can't Say Goodbye to Yesterday, which is the theme song for Metal Gear Solid 2, and I think it's fitting because a lot of people can't say goodbye to yesterday, and I think a lot of people are very confused and very angry, and there's a lot of frustration that I'm seeing along social media and stuff like that, and I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I definitely will be paying a lot closer attention to the way that news is filtered to me, and that's something that I'm going to look to explore in future episodes of the podcast. So anyway, I think the song is really great. I've used it on another episode before, but it's such a nice and relaxing song. Yeah, it's Good. Anyway, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you guys next week, I hope. I've been El Dinero. Peace.
Why can't each of us in the world ever see the best things in life are free? Little sounds of laughter, a warm hug, a smile, a kiss from you to me. I fall to my knees, I cry and I cry. Love, do not pass me by. Happy ever after, please stay for a while. Make time refuse to fly. I can't say goodbye to yesterday, my friend, 'cause I know how good it has been. Facing forever, here I stand, come what may. Bring the old, bring the new, yesterday. It's there that I'll find inner peace, not war, and dreams that I let slip away.